So this video, I'll be going over these readings that was on today's schedule. And to do this, I made a little PowerPoint that I'm just going to walk through that does correlate with the readings from this one, English 101, Research and Logical Arguments. So everything I'm going to cover is from most of these readings here today. And it's really important that you understand what this is early on to really properly build up your research paper. And so we're looking at research and logical arguments. And so understanding what all these different terms mean is important, because once you understand what they all mean, you'll understand how to use and apply them for your research paper. So we said a lot of this before, but an issue is something that has at least two sides and that can be debated, logically debated. So some brief examples: government spending, pollution from fossil fuels. There's no one-sided answer to these. There isn't 100% facts behind one of these issues. There's always going to be some kind of back and forth with these types of things. So your issue has to be about this. Your thesis has to be some kind of debatable issue like this. What you're going to be doing is taking one of those large topics, breaking it down to a single issue, which will become your thesis statement, and then doing a bunch of analysis on that. Okay, so this is literally what you're going to be doing. You're going to be breaking down an issue, a large, complex, integrated mixture of ideas, and they're going to break those down into distinct pieces. Then you're going to reform those pieces into a focused thesis that presents your informed interpretation of the issue. So again, this is your opinion, but it's going to be backed up by information, by credible sources, by facts, by anecdotes, by lots of different things, okay? And then you'll support your insight and your evaluation with various types of evidence as appropriate. And as appropriate just means the best kind of evidence that will support whatever issue it is that you're taking on, whatever your claim is going to be. And so there's four basic elements of any analysis for academic writing. So you're going to express an opinion. We also call it an assertion, a claim, right? You're going to support that opinion using specific examples, as specific as you could possibly find. Then you're going to justify your opinion. Again, explain the examples. Don't just throw an example out there and hope that the reader understands. You want to make sure to explain the example for them. And then you want to show them why your opinion matters. What is the significance of this issue that you want to analyze, that you're trying to justify, that you're spending this entire paper supporting, right? Make sure it's clear why it matters, why someone would care about it. In your argument, remember, your argument in academic sense isn't like yelling, fighting, throwing chairs and stuff like that, right? It's just a logical argument that takes a stance on an issue, and your goal is to persuade the reader that your opinion is the right one. By the end of your paper, you want the reader to agree with you. Again, it's an assertion intended to persuade, right? And don't fall into the trap of an argument has to be vicious, or an argument has to be something that makes someone else feel dumb or inferior or small, right? Very different types of argument in a typical face-to-face argument versus an academic argument, okay? And so these questions can kind of help you figure out what it is you need to discover, what you need to write about. Okay, so whatever your issue is, whatever your topic is, and once you've narrowed it down a little bit more, ask yourself these questions. If you actually write out these questions and write out your answers, or use like a recording device or something like that, you could just use an audio note on your phone if it's easiest. You'll find that this is a really good kind of pre-writing technique. So if you take your issue and you ask yourself all of these questions, it'll really help you arrive at a better idea of what you think about this and what you're able to find to support whatever your thesis statement is going to be. You'll also find that if you can't answer one of these questions, that alerts you that you need to spend a little bit more time on whatever that is, right? So how does it make you feel? Pretty simple, right? You're going to pick an issue initially. How does that make you feel? What's your gut reaction? All right. What is the purpose? What is the message? Who's the intended audience, right? All these kinds of questions will help you arrive at more informed answers that can help guide your research. Okay. This one, I'm not going to show it to you. You can watch it on your own when you play the whole PowerPoint. It's just a video. It's the exact same video that's in the reading. But the main points to pull from that video are these 5 tips. All right. So it says, step 1, formulate your question. In other words, know what you are looking for. If you pick a topic about something like school vouchers, what is your question about that? If you just say, like, I don't know, I want to find out more about school vouchers. technically that's a question, but the answer to that question isn't going to help guide you in your thesis creation. So thinking about the kinds of questions you want to ask that will lead to thesis statements. You can go back and watch the video from our last lecture to get more information about that. And then you want to gather your information. You're going to be just doing some research. Again, like I said last time, you can start with some very informal web research, just looking at Google, anything like that. Wikipedia is a good place for finding out good information, good definitions about the things you're talking about whatever issue it is that you're researching. And then apply the information. So once you've learned a little bit more about your issue, ask these critical questions, right? And then consider the implications. Whatever the answer to whatever the question is to whatever your issue is, everything is going to have some kind of implication. If you don't, it's kind of a really early alert that you didn't choose a college level topic, right? But if you're choosing from that list from the essay instructions, you're going to be able to think about the implications. For example, if your thesis statement is something about how the U.S. political system is rigged and we need to get rid of gerrymandering because it's swaying elections, right? Well, if you fix gerrymandering, what are some of the implications? What could happen if you fix it? There could be some immediate implications. There could be next week, next month, 5 years from now, the next generation. But think about all these different implications. It'll help you expand the breadth of your research and you won't fall short, right? And then definitely explore other points of views because multiple perspectives will often lead to a deeper understanding of the issue. If all you research and think about is your opinion and how to back up your opinion, and you never spend any time thinking about what the opposing viewpoint would be, you are missing half the conversation. So explore this opposing viewpoint. If you're writing about underpaid teachers, why are teachers paid so little in public schools, right? What's one of the other points of view? It could come from the administration point of view. They literally cannot afford to pay teachers more. And maybe they have really good reasons for that. But if you investigate what their side believes, it's going to help you inform your opinion much, much better. And then you have a much more unbiased argument running throughout your entire essay. So these are really good tips. Really watch this video again. I'm just not going to record a recording on this recording. Right? And then claims are important, right? Your claim is your thesis assertion, right? So this is the claim that you're making, the opinion that you have that's going to be based or going to be supported with facts. So your argument is only as valuable as its claim, which needs to be detailed, reasonable, and supportable with valid evidence, right? All of these are really key, okay? Again, if your argument is way too broad, if it's, your thesis is really kind of the thesis for a book, it's not going to be good enough. You need to narrow that down. It needs to be detailed enough. It has to be reasonable, right? You can't have some kind of outlandish claim, like silly examples like, the reason the declassified UFO files from, the FBI didn't prove aliens exist is because they're still hiding information about UFOs, right? And it's a claim, and you can watch 1,000 YouTube videos about it, but it's not really reasonable because you can't support it with valid evidence, right? It's kind of a conspiracy theory. They're fun to watch, they're fun to read about, they're fun to learn about and talk about, but you can't really support that with valid evidence. So it's not really a reasonable argument, all right? So just think about whatever claim it is that you're making, that thesis statement, what it is that you believe in, that you're able to be detailed about it, make sure it's reasonable, and make sure you can support it with evidence. So with claims, these are 3 good qualities. If you can check off these on your thesis, you're moving in the right direction. So the first one, they address important, relevant problems. Because remember, this has to be a college level, critical thinking, very high level thinking kind of paper. So your thesis, your main point, your claim has to be something important and relevant to someone just besides yourself. Okay. One way to think about it is this. Readers will think that the claim might help them address a problem they care about. So think about your audience, right? The people that you're writing for. What would it be that they would like to learn more about? Maybe they agree with your claim. How can you give them more information throughout the essay to where they feel like they have a really strong understanding of how to support that claim if someone asks them about their opinion, right? It has to be contestable, right? So it can't just be a statement of fact. It has to be something that is contestable. And it has to be debatable. It has to be something that can be proved or disproved. It can't be one of those like, well, this is what I said about this issue, but what do you think? That's not debatable. You're just leaving it out to the reader to figure it out. Okay. So make sure that your thesis, your claim, does all of these things. So you have different types of claims, right? So your thesis statement will probably fall into one of these, sometimes a mixture of them, but usually one of them. So we have claims of fact, claims of value, and claims of policy, okay? Really important here is it doesn't matter which kind of claim you have. You'll usually combine different types of support for the claim to write a logical argument, right? So whether it's a claim of fact, a claim of value, or a claim of policy, the types of support you're going to use to back up that claim are going to be all over the map. The most different kinds of support you can find, the more supportive that claim is going to be. No, lost my spot, sorry. So claims of fact, right? A claim of fact makes an assertion about something that can be proved or disproved with factual evidence, okay? Again, keep that extreme like conspiracy theory stuff out of your head, right? It has to be factual evidence. If it's something that's like a scientific study, it can be reproducible over and over and over again, right? A claim of fact for a logical argument cannot simply consist of a stat or a proven fact. Remember, it can't just be something that is already 100% true, because then it's not a claim. That's not an opinion. You can't have an opinion about a fact. It's a fact. By definition, that's what makes it a fact, right? So it needs instead to focus on an assertion, which uses facts to back it up, but for which the evidence may or may not still be debatable, right? Because there is going to be another side, an opposing viewpoint to whatever claim it is that you're making. If you have an inappropriate claim of fact, right? So this, pretend like this is your thesis statement, or this is just a fact that it's not debatable, right? The month of March 2017 was 1.03 degrees Celsius above the 20th century average. This marked the first time the monthly temperature departed from an average surpassed 1 degree Celsius in the absence of an El Nino episode in the tropical Pacific Ocean. There's no assertion here, right? This is all just a fact. This would be a terrible thesis, right? This could be used to support a claim because it's good factual evidence, but by itself, it is not a claim, right? It is not debatable. It's simply a fact. Versus saying it this way: decreasing carbon dioxide emissions from car exhausts, manufacturing processes, fertilizers, and landfills while slowing deforestation may help slow the process of global warming, right? And this is a statement of fact because you're able to back up all of these pieces of information with credible evidence, right? Decreasing carbon monoxide emissions from car exhaust may help slow the process of global warming. That's a fact. We have lots of science behind that, right? Decreasing CO2 emissions from the manufacturing process could help slow the process of global warming. Again, we have information, factual information that will support this. But someone could easily come in and say, well, while this might be true, these aren't the biggest issues causing global warming. It's these issues, or it's this other thing, right? So they could logically disagree with this claim of fact. It doesn't make this not true. It just makes something else slightly more true, maybe, depending on who can kind of provide the better evidence for it. You also have claims of value. So a claim of value argues that something is good or that something is bad, or that one thing or one version of something is better than some other thing, all right? So it's a very kind of debatable thing, but again, you're going to support this claim based on evidence, right? So we look at these examples. It's better to apply good nutritional choices at home than teach them at school, because good nutrition then becomes ingrained in the child's experience, right? They're saying it's better. One of these things is better than the other one, right? And again, someone could disagree and say the complete opposite, right? So it's a good claim that you could then go throughout the essay supporting with factual evidence. Similarly here, although immunotherapy has produced some good results in fighting cancer, overall, it is less effective than chemotherapy, right? So again, they're saying one thing is better than the other one, and then you would spend the essay proving that one thing is better than the other one. So that's a claim of value. Your thesis could also be a claim of policy, okay? And this basically argues that certain conditions should exist or shouldn't exist, or that something should be done or something should stop being done in order to solve a problem. All right. So the examples help clarify this. The city's Board of Education should institute an honors program, not only for high school students, but for elementary and junior high school, and junior high school students as well, right? So they're saying some kind of policy should be instituted. And it doesn't have to mean like a government policy or an administrative policy, but something needs to change or something needs to be created to make this happen. And so this is a policy claim. Another good example here. Just as smoking ads have been banned in order to decrease the urge to engage in an unhealthy behavior, soda ads should be banned for the same reason, right? So their claim here, their policy claim is soda ads should be banned, right? And again, with this one, you can clearly see there's clearly two sides to this issue. Some people say, no, it's soda, and people have freedom of choice and free will, and they should be able to drink as much soda as they want. And someone else might say, well, my whole family has this horrible history of type 2 adult onset diabetes that they started getting when they were 12 because they drank, a 12 pack of Coca-Cola every single day. And they're not strong enough to not drink it. So at the very least, we should ban soda ads. Not the sale of soda, but ban soda ads. And you can see these two people having a good debate about those types of things, right? But they're saying something has to be changed. It's a claim of policy. So again, if you can recognize which one of these three, fact, value, or policy, that your thesis falls under, it's going to be a little bit easier to generate all the body paragraphs, all your topic sentences, because you understand what type of claim your thesis is. It's going to be easier to see what types of support you should use for that type of claim. So when you want to support them, okay, and this is important, writers are generally most successful with their audience when they can skillfully and appropriately balance the three core types of appeals to support their claim. If you're trying to prove a point to someone, you don't come up with one point of support and keep saying that one point of support over and over and over and over again, right? Only parents get away with that. When you say, well, how come I can't go hang out with Billy? And they say, because I said so, right? Not good support, but it's the parent, so they get away with it. In academic writing, these are the three types of support you want to use. And you might have heard of these before. So logos, pathos, and ethos. So logos is an appeal to logic. An appeal just means it's something that appeals to the reader that convinces them that what you're saying is correct, right? So if you're appealing to logic, you're using logic to help convince them. Or pathos, you're appealing to their emotion to help convince them. Or ethos, you're appealing to some authority, someone that really knows about this, something with good credibility, in order to appeal to them and convince them that what you're saying is correct. So it doesn't matter that you can or cannot exactly identify which kind you're using, but understanding that there's three of them and using a mixture of all three is the best way to strongly support your claims, okay? So if we look at the first one, the appeal to logic, logos, okay? This can include a bunch of different types of evidence, like established facts, which you'll find in your research, case studies, statistics, experiments, all these you will find in your research. And then analogies and logical reasoning. This one is a little bit tougher because this requires you to take these other types of support and then analyze them and create analogies between them to create logical connections between two different pieces of information. We'll get to this a little bit more later on, but understanding that all these different types of evidence are all the use of the appeal to logic, right? In this one, especially if you're writing a very science-oriented paper, you're going to be very heavy on the logic, right? Because science uses lab reports, uses hypothesis testing, and all those types of things. So there's lots of this kind of stuff to support a logical appeal. Right? Then you also have the appeal to emotion. This one is probably the strongest one because as human beings, we're very prone to believing what our emotions tell us to do, all right? You don't want to get too carried away, though. If you're a really good politician, you use pathos all the time, but it's not really the most credible form of support. It sounds really good. It's very convincing. It makes people very happy or very angry or very fearful or very proud, but it's not really good evidence unless it's tied to one of the other appeals, all right? So using like personal anecdotes. Remember, an anecdote is just a brief story that has a point, right? Using narratives, telling stories, looking at impact studies or firsthand testimony, right? So all of these types of things work really well because, again, like I said, human beings like our emotions, right? If you read something and it makes you angry, they're using an emotional appeal of anger to get a response out of you, right? And then we have the appeal through authority, right? And this one you use a lot in combination with logos and with pathos. Excuse me. And so this is just using credibility, right? So not just personal anecdotes, but personal anecdotes from people that have something qualified there, right? So if you're writing about the high cost of medical care or something like that, what could be done about it? A personal anecdote from like a nurse with firsthand experience could be really important, right? If you get like an interview with a nurse about their experience with, health insurance or something like that, really good information because they're on the front lines. They're there day in and day out, seeing all this information, right? You can also use information from recognized experts. So like doctors that study, how hospitals should function, looking at researchers that study, healthcare in the US versus healthcare in other countries across the globe, right? Any of that information is good because it's logical, but it's also appealing to authority. It's not just like, oh, my dentist said that health premiums are high because of blah, 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 right? And if he's just a dentist, that's a doctor, right? But versus a doctor that actually studies health insurance and rates and all these types of things, one of them has a little bit more authority to speak on the matter, right? Similarly, let's say, you're in charge of a baby, whether it be like, your own baby or you're babysitting, something like that. You wouldn't call your friend who has never taken care of a baby in their entire life and ask them advice about what to do if the baby is crying, right? You would call your mom, or you would call a friend who has already had a kid, or you would even look up on the internet to find out what medical professionals who specialize in pediatrics would tell you to do, right? You're looking for that authority to tell you what the best thing to do is. Same thing with using this in your writing, right? The most credible kinds of information can be the best kind of information. So once you understand what these are and you're finding some information, now you're like, okay, well, how do I use these types of things? Okay. So most logical argument essays rely on combinations of these three supporting appeals, right? Perhaps one of them is kind of the primary one. And again, depending on what your topic is and what your angle is, what your claim it is that you're making, it'll change, right? Some of you might have more of an emotional kind of appeal. Some of you might find that the logical appeal is going to be the best one suited for you. So you might lean on one of them more than the others, but you should always use all three of them throughout the paper, all right? And then really important, as you develop support for your thesis, consider the type of claim and the type of support that will best convince your audience of your claim, right? With the understanding that you're still writing a logical argument, not an argument based solely on emotional appeals, right? So if you say, we need to change the way that drug abusers are treated in our prison system or our court system, because my mom went to prison for a drug-related offense and she didn't deserve that. And now I'm angry and I hate the system, right? That's too much emotion for a claim. It's too much. It might be 100% true and I might fully believe you, right? But because it's so emotional, it's going to be hard to think that anything else you say is going to be a good, valid observation using good, credible support, right? Because you're too emotional about it. You're too closely tied to it, right? So you can include the emotional appeals, but make sure that your claim isn't just an emotional appeal, right? You can't say, well, college should be free for everyone because paying for college sucks. I mean, we kind of all agree with that. Paying for stuff in general sucks, right? So it's an emotional argument. And so that being your thesis leads to a poor thesis. There's lots of other ways to phrase that aren't so emotional, right? So you look at a claim of fact. And looking at these examples and really reading over them again and again will really help you identify what kind of thesis it is that you have or what kind of thesis you want to create. So if we have this claim of fact, decreasing carbon dioxide emissions from car exhaust, manufacturing processes, fertilizers, and landfills while slowing deforestation may help the slow process of global warming. That's my claim. That's my thesis, right? So my support might include these types of things. Facts that show the linkage between increased carbon dioxide levels and warmer temperatures. That's almost a no-brainer. You would definitely want to show as CO2 rises, the temperatures rise. And you can look that up and find lots of information about that. You might also want to look at studies done showing that fuel emission laws enacted in certain location actually cut down on CO2 levels, right? So if you look at, a certain area of California where they really implemented some policy changes about fuel emission, right? And you say, well, look how much lower the CO2 levels are in this area just over the last 10 years versus another area that has none of these policy changes, right? That's a good kind of comparison for logical support for this kind of claim, right? And then you look for more recognized experts. You can use testimony of firsthand experience again. So all of these are types of support you would use to support this claim. If you have a claim of value, good nutrition should be taught in school rather than at home, right? So you could use statistics, like studies done over time that show elementary school children who receive lessons on good nutrition maintain good eating habits into adulthood more so than those that do not receive formal lessons, right? And if you can find information in studies, which are definitely out there, that have schools that have a clear nutrition program in like second, third, fourth, or fifth grade, that over time, longitudinally, if they look at those same people 10 years later, the people that had a class like that in school are typically healthier people into adulthood, right? And so that kind of information is good logical support. You could also use personal narratives, again, citing experts in the field and testimony as well. But something that has specific information where you could do an experiment and measure the changes in one place versus another place, or one population versus another population. You're going to find some really good statistics that you could use to support that claim. And then you have policy ones. So just as smoking ads have been banned in order to decrease viewers' urges to engage in unhealthy behavior, soda ads should be banned for the same reason, right? And again, look up facts showing the linkage of soda consumption to increased chance of various diseases. I can tell you right off the bat, this is really easy to find, right? If you just Google, how does sugar impact the diet? How does sugar impact your health? Impact maturation, impact adult obesity, impact diabetes, tons of stuff here, right? And then lots of experts have chimed in and written papers about this or talked about this. There's lots of case studies, there's an enormous amount of statistics, and there's some personal narratives as well, right? So using kind of all these different types of support, you would be using all those different appeals, which would make for a strong support of this claim. So when you've done some research, you have some idea what you're talking about. You're really trying to focus on what your thesis is going to be, or your working thesis, because you still have a lot of research to do. You want to start thinking about these types of things, right? So what is I want to say? How can I develop this, right? So identify an issue about which you can make a claim and then develop a logical argument, right? Again, and I keep this in all these slides here because it's super important. Remember, an issue is a concept with at least two sides. It must be debatable. Right? For example, making the claim that many people use social media would not be debatable, right? Does anybody disagree that many people use social media? No, because many people do. The word many isn't a specific number, right? But many people do. It's globally popular, so it's not debatable. But if you wanted to write something about social media and the overusage of it or something like that, you could write something like this instead. Social media are hurting the communication skills of young Americans. Now it's debatable, right? Because some people could argue, well, actually, I have a very autistic son who never talks to anyone except on social media. So social media is actually helping his communication skills. That's a valid counter argument, right? And now we have a debatable thesis, a debatable claim, right? So make sure that yours passes that same kind of test. So one way of creating a thesis for an argument essay about an issue is to understand that an argument is a claim with reasons, right? I believe this because of this, this, and this, right? If you can't clearly say that, you don't have a thesis yet, right? So in other words, the thesis both makes a claim and indicates a conclusion, right? You're saying something and you kind of have a conclusion. It's not the full, everything fully supported conclusion, but it's there, right? And usually you have words like because or as, right? So if you look at these ones and they have that because statement or an as statement, it's very obviously a good claim. So we look at these ones. A flat percentage income tax should be instituted. because it can simplify taxation, make taxation fair by requiring the same income percentage from everyone, and generate more income by eliminating loopholes for the wealthy, right? And it's obvious this paper is going to talk about simplifying taxation, making taxation fair, generating more income by eliminating loopholes, right? It's here, it's in the thesis, it's in the claim, right? But someone else could also debate this and say, no, a flat percentage income tax should not be instituted, and then list all the reasons why it should not be instituted, right? Even though they may help smokers quit, flavored e-cigarettes should be banned because they target young smokers to start smoking. They are just as addicted as regular cigarettes. They have the potential for delivering even more nicotine than traditional cigarettes through extra strength cartridges, and they may cause severe respiratory and other health problems. It is very clear where this paper is headed, right? And if you can create a thesis like this, it's also a guide for you, right? You know you're going to have at least one body paragraph about how e-cigarettes are targeting young smokers. You're going to have at least one body paragraph about how they are just as addictive as regular cigarettes, right? You're going to have at least one body paragraph about the potential for delivering even more nicotine because you can get some really high nicotine cartridges for vapes and things like that, right? And you're going to have at least a body paragraph about how it causes other health problems, right? So if you can craft your thesis like this, it's a good guidepost. If you can't, let's say you just have this at first. Even though they may help smokers quit, flavored e-cigarettes should be banned, right? That's a perfectly fine working thesis statement. It is a claim. It is debatable, right? As you do more research, as you start to pre-write, as you start to generate your topic sentences, you'll start to write these things, right? So let's say you wrote a paragraph about this, paragraph about this, paragraph about this, so on and so forth. Then go back to your thesis and say, okay, I do have this. This was my main claim, but I'm going to add my development here. So I'm going to add all of my main ideas in my body paragraphs to my thesis statement, right? So you can do it either way. Similarly, this one, technological change has diminished human communication as it has influenced written language to become terse and has lessened the propensity for people to talk to one another in public spaces, right? And this is a fancy way of saying technology has made us bad at communication, right? But it sounds much better. It's more clear. And it kind of shows you some of the direction that this essay could take, right? It's influenced the written language, right? To become terse and has lessened the propensity for people to talk to one another in public spaces. Off the top of my head, I don't disagree with this, right? I think, yeah, that's pretty true, especially about social media. If you think about how few people talk to strangers anymore, right? So I can see where this is headed. And if you can envision where a thesis statement is going to lead in the paper, you probably have a pretty good claim. You have a good thesis going. So when you're developing this, so think of these questions. And if you take the time to do this, it's going to help you understand how to organize your paper and what kind of stuff you need to find or what stuff you already have and where to use it. So what do you want me to do, or what do you want me to think? Why should I do that, or why should I think that? How do I know that what you say is true? What about this other idea, or this other fact, or this other perspective or consideration? And then what general principles ground your argument? So being able to answer these questions really helps you identify how to organize your information. So look at this first one. The answer to what do you want me to do or think? That's your claim. That is your thesis statement. I claim that you should do or think X, right? Whatever your issue is, the answer to this could be your thesis statement. And then the answer to why should I do or think that are your reasons. These are your topic sentences. So if you can say you should do or think X because, and then fill in the blank for your first reason, your first piece of support, right? Topic sentence. You have a built-in topic sentence for a body paragraph. And then the answer to how do I know that what you say is true is your evidence. That's the support you're going to use inside of this body paragraph. And you just keep repeating this process for all the body paragraphs. The answer to what about this other idea acknowledges that your readers might see things differently, and that gives you an opportunity to respond to that opposing viewpoint. So you can look at the opposing side, and by bringing up the opposing side, it allows you to say why that's not a good reason or why that's not the right side of your position, right? So you're actually kind of bringing up the opposing viewpoint just in order to shut it down, but you are showing the audience that you've spent time thinking about this from multiple perspectives. And this could be a body paragraph or a couple of body paragraphs. It depends on how many kind of counterclaims you want to bring up. And then the fifth one, the answer to why should I accept that your reasons support your claim? State your general principle of reasoning. This is called a warrant. You don't have to remember that, but it's called a warrant. So my specific reason supports my specific claim because whenever this general condition is true, we can generally draw a conclusion like mine. So by using all these pieces of evidence, these reasons, you can formulate this warrant, right? So why should I accept that your reason supports your claim? Well, this is why. All this information I've provided you leads, connects A to B to C and points to my conclusion D or whatever it is, right? And so a really good example, I really like this one. It's a conversation. Excuse me. And it really is just a conversation. So to the question, what do you want me to do or think? All right, imagine this conversation. So Jim says, so did you hear about the hurricane that's headed for New Orleans? Sally says, yes, I think they should evacuate the city as soon as possible. This is a claim. I think, right? That's an opinion. Because the opposing side is, I don't think they should evacuate the city as soon as possible. You have a built-in debate, right? But that's the answer to, what do you want me to think? I want you to think that they should evacuate the city as soon as possible. Well, why should I think that? Really? Why do you say that? Well, New Orleans is surrounded by water and it's mostly below sea level. If a hurricane breaks the levees that keep the water out, the city will flood. Houses could be destroyed and people would be at risk. Very briefly, why should I think that? This is why you should think that, right? Well, how do I know that your reasons are true? So Jim says, well, will the levees actually break? Why do you think that they're in danger of failing? Sally's response, remember, how do I know your reasons are true? Remember Hurricane Katrina in 2005? The levees fell then, and the city was almost ruined. It's right there in the newspaper story. Many of the levees have been rebuilt or reinforced since Katrina, but the government is way behind, and there are a lot of levees that are just like the ones that failed after Katrina. And even the ones that have been rebuilt will not protect against the worst storm surges. And all this supports the answer to, how do I know that your reasons are true? And you can keep finding more and more research, more and more information that supports this. So what about this other idea? So this is that counter opinion. So Jim brings this in. Well, sure, the Katrina flood was a disaster, but this new hurricane is not as strong as Katrina. It poses much less danger, and evacuation is expensive. So a lot of counter arguments there. So Sally says, that's true. I'm agreeing with what you just said. The hurricane is weaker than Katrina now, but hurricanes often get stronger as they approach land, and you can't wait until the last minute to evacuate. People will just get stuck out on the roads. So I think that everyone should evacuate, even if it is expensive, and at the moment seems that it may not be necessary. Better safe than sorry, right? So she's acknowledging there is a counter opinion, and then she's saying why her opinion is still better than the counter one. And then why should I accept that your reasons support your claim? So Jim, after this conversation, says, I don't know. Being too safe may not be smart. I'm not sure that the risk of flooding is enough to force an evacuation. So he's still like, he's listened to the conversation. He's still not really 100% buying in. So Sally says, well, I believe that no cost is too high to save lives. Oh, emotional appeal. That's a pretty good one. So whenever we can anticipate a reasonable possibility that lives will be endangered, we should be willing to accept a reasonable cost to avoid the loss of life. And that's kind of hard to argue with. Even though the hurricane may not cause flooding, there is enough chance that it will. The cost of an evacuation is not too high a price to pay to save lives. And that's a really good way, right? Why should I accept that your reasons support your claim? Well, people dying is never a good thing. And if there's a chance of avoiding that, we should do it no matter what the cost is, right? And Jim's only response would be, well, I still think you're wrong. I'm really cheap, or something like that, right? So his response to her response would not be a very strong one, right? So if you can go through your topic using question 1 and do the same kind of thing, question 2, do the same thing, go through all of these, it'll really help you see if you have a good claim, a good thesis statement, or if you still have a lot of work to do, right? The first one, what do you want me to do or think? Easy answer, it's your thesis statement. Remember, go back to this one, right? This is your claim, right? The other ones you'll develop as you work on this project, right? So your reasons will turn into your topic sentences. And then all of your evidence will help support your topic sentences. And this is where you're going to do a bunch of research, right? Then you'll acknowledge that your readers might see things differently and respond. And then you'll ultimately convince them that what you said here in your thesis is true because of all this stuff. So you should really think about that. Right. And it's a kind of a dumb way to think about it, but it works. If you think about it in those terms, it's going to be so much easier. Right.